In every society across generations, there is one invisible current that has shaped how women relate to power, security, and intimacy. It is not new, it is not modern, it is embedded deep in our evolutionary blueprint. But today, it's wearing a new face, filtered through selfies, curated through dating apps, and sold as empowerment when sometimes it's manipulation in disguise. We're talking about hypergamy. The quiet instinct, or calculated strategy, where a woman seeks to form intimate connections only with those she perceives as more powerful, more successful, more resourceful. But in this new digital arena, where validation is currency and attention is the new affection, hypergamy has taken on a transactional form that distorts both love and desire. Let me be clear. Seeking stability is not a crime. Wanting to feel secure, provided for, respected, these are legitimate human needs. But when connection becomes a conquest, when intimacy becomes a means to an end, we are no longer in the realm of love. We are now playing a game of acquisition. And relationships, real ones, cannot thrive where manipulation replaces vulnerability. This is not about blaming femininity. This is not about shaming choice. This is about recognizing how a survival strategy, when left unchecked, can mutate into a tool of power play. It's the woman who withholds affection until the lifestyle matches her ambition. The one who chases the man with the corner office but sneers at the one with the kind eyes. The woman who performs connection but never opens her heart because the goal was never intimacy, it was elevation. And here's the irony. The very thing she's using to rise, the man, the status, the illusion, becomes the very cage that prevents her from experiencing deep love. Why? Because genuine intimacy requires reciprocity, not just of affection but of risk. It demands that you be seen in your truth, not in your designer dress or your filtered posts, but in your rawness, your tenderness, your uncertainty. When women fall into the hypergamy trap, they trade connection for calculation. And in doing so, they disconnect not only from others, but from themselves. So here is my call, not just to women who have used this pattern unconsciously, but to all of us watching it unfold in culture, in dating norms, in social media trends. Let us redefine what it means to choose a partner. Let us stop reducing love to leverage. Let us step out of the performative and back into the authentic. Power is not found in whom you catch, it's found in how you connect. Desire thrives not in dominance but in depth. And the relationships that last, the ones that transform, are not built on strategy, but on courage. Choose courage, choose connection, and dare to love without a trap. What if I told you that some of the most modern dating behaviors we see today are actually ancient survival instincts wrapped in designer packaging? You see, hypergamy, the idea of seeking a partner with higher social, financial, or physical status, isn't new. It's a deeply wired evolutionary strategy. But when it enters the emotional terrain of relationships, especially today's romantic culture, it morphs into something more complex and often more destructive than we realize. Women throughout history sought safety in their choice of partner, not just physical protection but emotional security, resources, and future assurance for themselves and their offspring. That drive isn't shameful, it's human. But what happens when this instinct becomes gamified, digitized, and fused with social media's craving for status? A relationship that begins with the language of hierarchy can never quite speak the dialect of intimacy. And yet, in today's culture, you'll see it so clearly. Dating profiles that don't just ask, what do you value, but more subtly demand, what can you offer me to elevate my life? The apps, the feeds, the curated images, they don't promote presence or connection, they reward positioning. And so a woman may be swiping not just for a partner, but for a lifestyle. She's not dating someone, she's upgrading, not connecting with a soul, but acquiring an asset. And in the beginning, it might feel exciting, powerful even, to choose someone based on potential, influence, or image. But underneath, something vital is already being eroded: mutual vulnerability. Because in the realm of true intimacy, the playing field must be level, not in bank accounts or accolades, but in openness, in mutual risk, in the willingness to be seen. Hypergamy, in its modern expression, disrupts that balance. It creates a dynamic where one partner is elevated and the other performs connection as a means to ascend. And that imbalance quietly builds emotional distance. Suddenly she isn't asking, who are you really? She's thinking, how far can you take me? And the relationship becomes a contract rather than a connection. Even more quietly, it builds anxiety, a chronic fear of replacement. If the connection was based on who can provide more, what happens when someone else can provide better? If love was born in comparison, it will die in competition. And women who lean heavily into hypergamous instincts often find themselves surrounded by men, but untouched by love, praised, pursued, but never fully known. Because when you lead with what you want to extract, you rarely invite someone to pour into you authentically. The deepest form of love doesn't emerge when you stand above your partner, but when you stand beside them. Yet in this cultural push to choose up to secure someone who represents power or success, we forget that the real currency of a relationship isn't status, it's safety. Emotional, psychological, relational safety. The kind you can't buy, can't fake, and can't negotiate through manipulation. What happens when the desire for emotional security becomes a strategy, a game of precision rather than passion? In relationships, the line between self-protection and manipulation is razor thin. Hypergamy, when approached through the lens of relational intimacy, reveals something deeper than status seeking. It uncovers a fear of true emotional exposure. Because when love becomes a means to secure resources, to escape vulnerability, the very essence of intimacy begins to unravel. And yet many don't even realize it's happening. She thinks she's being wise, discerning, careful. But underneath that discernment lies a quiet calculation. Who will give me the safest life, not the most authentic love? The tragedy is that intimacy does not bloom in environments where connection is calculated. When a woman sees a relationship as a stepping stone to comfort, luxury, or elevation, she is not entering into connection, she's entering into transaction. And the moment intimacy is tethered to transaction, trust begins to fracture, because the partner can feel it. Even if it's never spoken, even if it's buried beneath flirtation or feigned affection, there's an energy that communicates, I'm not fully here for you, I'm here for what you represent. That kind of connection doesn't deepen, it performs, it pleases, it positions, but it doesn't risk, it doesn't surrender, it doesn't reach the electric depth of emotional resonance where both people feel seen in their rawness, not just their roles. Love that's born from calculation often becomes conditional. She loves him when he performs, she connects when it's convenient, she opens up when it's safe, but never enough to be hurt. And without that mutual exposure, without both partners saying, here I am, unguarded, messy human, there is no real intimacy. Only two people playing out a silent contract where the terms are unspoken but deeply felt. Now imagine the man in this situation, sensing that her affection rises and falls with his ability to maintain a certain lifestyle. He begins to perform too. He doesn't show weakness, he overcompensates, he polishes his image to meet the criteria that keeps her close. What results is two people in costume, rehearsing closeness but never quite touching the core. No laughter from the belly, no tears in shared vulnerability, no silence that feels safe, only performance, precision, and a fear that if either one slips, the illusion crumbles. This is where intimacy dies, not in conflict, but in avoidance. Not in dramatic betrayal, but in the quiet absence of emotional risk. And when a woman uses relationship as a strategy for elevation, she unintentionally blocks herself from the very connection she craves. Because love is not a ladder. It is not something you climb to escape where you are. It's something you enter to discover who you are with another. In all your imperfection, your longing, your uncertainty. And here's the hook. When safety becomes the primary motive, strategy replaces sincerity. And strategy, while brilliant in business or survival, is the poison of emotional closeness. Because love doesn't thrive in conditions, it thrives in surrender. She calls it empowerment. She says she's just knowing her worth. She speaks of standards, of ambition, of wanting more, and on the surface it sounds like growth. It sounds like a woman in command of her choices, confident in her desires. But if you listen closely, there's something hollow beneath the empowerment narrative. Because not all empowerment is rooted in wholeness. Some of it is born from pain, from fear, from a quiet desperation to never feel powerless again. And that's where the hypergamy trap begins to tighten, when what looks like confidence is actually control wrapped in charm. In modern intimacy, we often confuse independence with emotional isolation. A woman might believe that by selecting a partner who elevates her lifestyle, she's exercising choice. But when the choice is rooted in fear, fear of scarcity, fear of abandonment, fear of being unseen, it stops being empowering and starts being strategic. This isn't a woman stepping into her fullness. This is a woman surviving behind a polished mask, and the cost of that mask, her deepest ability to truly connect. You see, real empowerment isn't about leveraging a partner's power. It's about cultivating your own. It's about showing up as a whole person, not seeking to complete yourself through someone else's status. But in the hypergamous dynamic, the connection isn't about mutual expansion. It's about using one person's life to bypass the work of building your own. And when love becomes a shortcut, it loses its soul. It stops being intimate and becomes instrumental. She might not say it out loud, but it shows up in the relationship. Her admiration is conditional. Her affection shifts with his career success. Her presence deepens only when his performance meets her expectations. And while she may celebrate this as not settling, what she's really settling for is a performance, a life that looks perfect from the outside but feels distant on the inside. The intimacy becomes staged, the connection becomes filtered, and emotional availability is traded for status alignment. But here's the most seductive part of this trap. Society applauds it. The culture reinforces it. Social media glorifies it. You'll see her posted next to a luxury car, a designer bag, or a carefully curated partner, and the comments will read, "Queen, level up, secure the bag." Very few will pause to ask, but is she loved? Does she feel safe to be soft? Is she able to rest in emotional closeness? Or is she constantly performing strength? True feminine power is not found in who you attract. It's in how authentically you can connect. It's in being soft without fear, vulnerable without shame, open without manipulation. When hypergamy becomes the measure of value, it teaches women to withhold until rewarded, to perform until praised, to connect only if compensated. And that isn't empowerment, it's entrapment in a gilded cage. Here's the hook. If the love you're offering only comes after someone meets your checklist, it's not love, it's leverage. And leverage may help you climb, but it will never help you connect. What happens when love is no longer an emotional offering but a calculated exchange? When connection is filtered through what someone can provide rather than who they truly are? In the world of modern hypergamy, transactional love has taken center stage, a dynamic where emotions are no longer freely expressed but leveraged, withheld, and negotiated like currency. And in this space, emotional vulnerability becomes a threat to control, not a bridge to deeper connection. You'll hear it in the language, "He needs to earn my time. If he really wants me, he'll prove it. Love is an investment. I don't give it for free." These phrases sound empowered, even wise, but behind them is often a quiet fear of surrender, a belief that love must be earned, not given, and only given when the return is guaranteed. This is the core wound of transactional intimacy. It strips the relationship of its humanity and replaces it with performance metrics. She's loving with conditions. She's showing up, but only to the extent that her emotional stock remains protected. If he slips, if he fails to meet expectations, financial, social, or emotional, the connection weakens. Because in her mind, it was never about him, it was about what he could sustain, and in return, he senses it. He doesn't feel chosen for who he is, but for what he brings. The romance becomes a pressure cooker of unspoken expectations, where neither feels safe enough to just be. Real intimacy isn't built on perfection, it's built on presence. But in transactional love, presence is only maintained when the transaction is favorable. Vulnerability is rationed. Emotional support is strategic. The relationship becomes a constant negotiation, and beneath it, a quiet fear begins to grow. What if I can't keep up? What if I'm not enough? What if I'm replaceable? The very dynamic meant to create security becomes the source of chronic insecurity. Because when affection is used as leverage, when touch, attention, loyalty, or even sex are withheld or distributed based on performance, intimacy withers. Trust becomes fragile. Love loses its spontaneity, its warmth, its organic unfolding. It's no longer an emotional dance, it's a contract. And contracts may provide structure, but they do not create desire. Desire thrives in openness, in risk, in moments where both partners can be unguarded, where they choose each other not for gain but for connection. But when she operates from a place of what can I get from him rather than how can I share with him, she unintentionally blocks the very experiences that make love transformative. Emotional generosity, sexual freedom, playful tenderness, all of it is restrained, calculated, sometimes even weaponized. Here's the hook. If intimacy only flows when the terms are right, it's not love, it's control. And control might keep things stable, but it will never make them feel alive. There's a certain loneliness that no luxury handbag, 5-star vacation, or diamond ring can touch. It's the ache of being admired but not understood, of being wanted but not truly known. Hypergamy, when pursued as a strategy for connection, often leads to exactly that. A polished life filled with validation and attention, yet an inner world echoing with emotional isolation. Because no matter how glamorous the relationship may appear, without real emotional presence, it becomes a hollow performance. And the deeper truth is, women who rely on hypergamy as their pathway to love are often the ones silently starving for connection. On the outside, it may seem like she has everything, the successful partner, the aesthetic lifestyle, the curated love story, but inside there's a disconnection that words can't always articulate. because she knows deep down that she isn't being loved for who she truly is. She's being valued for how well she fits the role. The role of the beautiful partner, the ambitious woman, the social climber. And the moment she no longer plays that part, the connection feels at risk. And this is the cost of entering love from a place of elevation rather than authenticity. She cannot fully rest in the relationship because she fears losing her place in it. Every disagreement feels like a threat. Every failure or moment of vulnerability feels like a risk she can't afford. So instead, she plays it safe. She stays charming, composed, impressive, and emotionally guarded. She's visible yet invisible, present yet absent, engaged yet disconnected. Because hypergamy doesn't just influence who you choose, it shapes how you show up. It tells her to be strategic, not sincere. It teaches her to protect, not to share. It convinces her that her value is tied to how well she can secure someone better rather than how openly she can love. And while she may attract attention, gifts, status, what she rarely attracts is the kind of emotional intimacy that brings peace, passion, and meaning. He may admire her, he may provide for her, he may even commit. But if he senses that she's with him for his lifestyle rather than his soul, he holds back too. He may be present physically, but emotionally, he retreats. Because real closeness cannot exist where motives are unclear, and what begins as mutual attraction becomes quiet resentment. He feels used, she feels unseen. Both are surrounded by abundance, yet craving depth. And in that craving, she starts to long for something more than success. She begins to yearn for softness, for safety, for the kind of love that doesn't need to be earned but welcomed. The kind of relationship where she can take off the mask, drop the performance, and simply be, without fearing that her worth will be measured by how much she gains. Here's the hook. The pursuit of hypergamy may fill your hands, but it often empties your heart. Because what women truly desire, beyond the status and the stability, is to feel chosen, cherished, and emotionally held. There's a kind of power that doesn't shout, it doesn't flaunt wealth or status, it doesn't rely on applause or external validation. It moves quietly in the way you hold space for another's emotions, in the way you allow yourself to be seen without armor, in the way you offer presence over performance. And this kind of power, the emotional risk, the willingness to connect without control, is the very thing that hypergamy often suppresses. Because when the pursuit is elevation, not connection, intimacy gets replaced with image, and the deeper truth gets buried beneath layers of curated perfection. When a woman selects a partner to secure her future, to elevate her social standing, or to escape the discomfort of building on her own, she may succeed in constructing an impressive life, but that life often comes at the cost of deep, soul-stirring connection. Because in that model, vulnerability feels dangerous. Letting someone see the parts of you that are unfinished, unsure, or not yet healed feels like a liability. So instead, she polishes, she protects, she performs. And slowly she becomes emotionally unavailable in a relationship that appears ideal on the outside. But relationships thrive not on perfection but on permission. Permission to feel, to fail, to not know, to come undone and still be held. Emotional safety doesn't come from financial certainty or social advantage, it comes from the unspoken agreement between two people that says, you don't have to earn my love, you just have to be real. And that's the paradox of hypergamy. In trying to feel more secure, it often creates more distance. More tension, more guardedness, because when love is linked to status, status becomes the condition for love. And in that dynamic, both people lose. She can't fully relax into softness because she's always calculating her worth in relation to his power. He can't offer true emotional presence because he fears he's being loved for what he provides, not who he is. The relationship becomes a performance of roles rather than an unfolding of intimacy. A life shared on paper but not in the quiet moments that actually build emotional connection. True relational power, the kind that transforms, heals, awakens, lies not in your ability to attract someone impressive, but in your ability to stay open when everything in you wants to shut down, to choose curiosity over control, to prioritize connection over image. That is the emotional risk. That is the courage of intimacy. And it is not always glamorous. It doesn't always look like success, but it feels like home. Because power isn't in the status of the one beside you, it's in the safety you co-create together, in the way you allow yourself to be seen, heard, and chosen, not for what you offer, but for who you are. That's the kind of love that doesn't just elevate your life, but expands your soul. Here's the hook. Connection is the real luxury and vulnerability is the price of entry.